Hi, everybody. My name is Michaela Beyer, and today I am interviewing the fabulous Iris Berry. Iris has been a musician for quite a long time. She was in the Lame Flames on the Sunset Strip in the 1980s, and then she was part of the Ringling Sisters later on. Now she runs a publishing company, and she has put out many great books on rock and roll, and she's going to tell us all about that today. Thank you so much for coming on, Iris.
Thank you for having me.
Good. Alrighty, so let's start from the very beginning. Where were you born and raised?
I was born in a place called Pacoima, California. It's right now it's known for being the home of Danny Trejo, but when I was growing up, I had three older brothers, and it was then known as the home of Richie Valens. And it's a bit of a rough neighborhood. You know what I mean? It's very, very different from it's like polar opposite from Hollywood. But yeah, it was in the San Fernando Valley.
And were you very musical growing up? I mean, even though Pacoima was a rough neighborhood, did it have an interesting music scene as the home of Richie Valens?
Well, okay, I had three older brothers, and my parents were never there. Like my mom and dad split up when I was about 3.
Hmm.
So my mom was raising 4 kids on her own. So she was never home. So our house was just wild. There was no parental guidance. And, my brothers were all into old cars and fixing them up and, lowering them and painting them and tinting them. And there was a pool table in the garage. So our house was basically a clubhouse for them and all their clubs and gangs. And
Oh,
there was always music playing in the background. There was always, you know, started out always Motown playing, and then they as their music transitioned, because that's all what I was getting spoon fed was their music. So they went from Motown to Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, and then David Bowie came. So I had a really great, I didn't really think about the fact whether there was music or not. It was just there. So I had a really great musical education thanks to them. And of course I inherited all their records. So yeah, it was very musical. There was a lot of music. And my mom was also, when she wasn't working, she had friends that worked at record companies, and she was hanging out the Whiskey a Go-Go and seeing bands. Like she took me to my first concert when I was 10, and that was to see Donovan at the Hollywood Bowl.
whoa, nice.
Yeah. So I had a good, great introduction to music from my family.
Excellent. And did it feel like normal to you, or did you already get a sense that your family was a little bit more independent and a little bit more unconventional than the typical setup?
Our house was very not normal. And because everyone else on the block, we were probably one of the only families on the street whose parents divorced. So it was kind of like, no, it wasn't kind of like, it was definitely all the good kids weren't allowed to come to our house because my brothers were such troublemakers. And I'm that's a nice way to put it. They were troublemakers. And I mean, they were boys, when my mom did take us places, like I remember we once went to this place called Busch Gardens, where
Hmm.
it was, and they had tours. And so basically it was us and all these other families on the catwalks getting this tour of Busch Gardens, where they brewed the beer. And we were up on this catwalk above these huge hops where were these just bubbling beer. And I saw my brothers were in front of me, and my one brother quietly said to my other brother, watch this. And my brother hawked a loogie into the hops. And the next thing I know, we were getting escorted out. Like, but that was normal. Us getting thrown out, my mom making them walk home to teach them a lesson. But that she never taught them a lesson because they were boys. So yeah, they were always doing crazy things. And so no one that was good was allowed to come to our house, and all the bad kids knew to come to our house. So did I know it was normal? Um, or did I think it was normal? No, I knew we were very not normal.
And did you like it that way?
I loved it. Are you kidding me? I mean, you know, and I will say this, I loved it because it was complete freedom.
Hmm.
And so I had the opportunity to do whatever I wanted, and I was always somehow protected.
Hmm.
But at the same time, you can't be that free without feeling a little lost.
Okay, that's
So but yes, I loved it. It was a blast.
Nice. And that's a good point to make. I mean, you were given a lot of freedom, but your brother still provided a protective shield, making sure that you were going to be okay.
Right, exactly. If it wasn't one of my brothers, it was one of their friends or whatever, I didn't know it at the time, but I had, a lot of people protecting me. And it was definitely sort of a false sense of security,
Mhm.
because when I transitioned into the world and into punk rock, I still felt like I was always going to be protected. And in lots of ways in punk rock, I was, but it was definitely a false sense of security. And yeah, it was great. It was wild and it was a lot of fun, and I wouldn't change a thing. But was it good? Was it proper child rearing? No. Was it a great plan for the future? Not really.
Okay. Well, one thing that I'm curious about is, were you a voracious reader when you were younger?
You know what? I love to read, but when I discovered movies, I loved movies more because I'm definitely more of a visual person.
Mhm.
And I had a lot of books. I was into Grimm fairy tales. I was into Dr. Seuss. I was into Mad Magazine. I was into, whatever was sort of passed down to me. I was definitely loved reading. But when movies came along, I think my first movie at a theater without my family was The Omega Men and Soylent Green. And I saw them both because there was double features then. I
Uh-huh.
saw them both back to back 9 times. I mean,
Oh,
I really loved movies.
that's so
Yeah,
cool.
you could definitely call me a cinephile.
Mhm.
And I still am to this day. I love the visuals. I absolutely, but I was definitely already a writer then. I was already writing. I would, because things were so crazy and there was no one to really go to, or maybe I was just naturally a writer, but these were the circumstances. I would just go in my room and write. I would write about what was going on. And I didn't really know that I was writing poetry or what. I didn't know. I didn't I didn't say, oh, I'm going to go and write now, or I'm going to spend the day writing. It was sort of a knee jerk reaction. I was naturally looking for creative outlets.
Uh-huh. So creativity was something that was in your blood. It wasn't really something that you had to discipline yourself to do or force yourself to do.
It was definitely in my blood, and it was definitely something that probably saved me because, just having this urge to be creative. Where I grew up, there wasn't really the the concept of being creative. And there were a lot of the people I grew up with were, going to jail, or I went to more funerals by the age of 12 probably than I did birthday parties. That
Wow.
was it was a very SC Hinton kind of background, if you know those books.
I love
That
her books,
and
especially
yes,
Rumblefish.
yeah, exactly. I mean, picture those books and picture those characters, and that's pretty much how I grew up. It was exactly that. So being creative really saved me, because Hollywood was right over the hill. And I knew by the time I was about 15, I knew that it was probably time for me to get out
Okay.
if I didn't want to get stuck in that life.
And on that note, did you wind up graduating high school or sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, I luckily graduated. I mean, I did something, well, it's not odd for me now to think about it, but when I was just so independent, and that's kind of what I was trying to explain, not having parental guidance, there was no authority figure, and there was no one telling me what I needed to do. So I did whatever I wanted. So even at school, I took the classes I wanted to take, and I would show up at a class, and basically most of them was either art or it was creative writing, and I loved, history and PE and anything art or anything historic, anything writing. I put myself in those classes, and the teachers were like, I don't see you on the schedule. I was like, well, it says right here. So I ended up getting to take whatever I wanted. And then as it was time we were getting ready to graduate, my counselor called me into the office, and he was like, Iris, you didn't take any of these classes. You're not going to graduate. And I said to him, I said, I really need to graduate. My mom has a heart problem and I'll do whatever you say. If I need to go to summer school, I'll do that. But I have to be in that graduation ceremony and I have to get my diploma. And he agreed to it.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, you were resourceful.
Yeah, my first con, really. My first big con. Yeah. So I did graduate, to answer your question. And then there was, what do I do now? So what I did was I moved to Hollywood. And it was right, it was the end of the 70s and punk rock was flourishing then.
And tell me about how you formed your first band in that environment.
Well, actually, I formed my first band in sixth grade. We were called the
Oh,
Mod Five, and we and I got, I grabbed four other girls, and we had a few rehearsals in my garage, and somehow our garage burned down. But it wasn't actually the first time the garage burned down. But my mom was like, "Okay, no more rehearsing in the garage. I think it's pissing off the neighbors." So I tried to start my first band in the sixth grade, and then being in Hollywood, my first band was the Lame Flames.
okay. And what was that like forming the Lame Flames? I mean, do you remember the first time that you met Mandy Bricks and Lisa Curland?
I remember we were all just sort of there was just a bunch of us because back in those days, you knew who you were going to be friends with just by the way you looked and the bands you went to see. And somehow we just all sort of fell together. The Lame Flames were already a band when I got into the band. And I was talking to Mandy about this the other day. They were already thinking of asking me to be in the band when they did ask me. And I didn't know any of that, but two of the members had left, Clayton and Anne. They were kind of tired of being in the band and they wanted to do other things. And so at that point, it was just Mandy and Lisa. And there was this bar on the corner of Sunset and Vine, and it was called the Sound Check. I don't know if anyone's talked about it in their interviews, but it wasn't like bands did play there, but it wasn't one of the clubs where bands played. It wasn't the Club Lingerie, it wasn't the Cafe de Grand, it wasn't Raji's, it wasn't the Whiskey. It was a bar first and foremost. And this woman started working there. Her name was Baba, and she was determined to do Baba's Jam Nights, which was every Sunday night. So everyone came and played, members of the Knitters, the guys from the Blasters, the Vandals, the Sirens, the Lame Flames. Anyone that was playing in clubs at that time signed up for Baba's Jam Night, and the Little Kings. It was really, really fun. And one night I was there. I wasn't working. I was just there, and I had a new car. One of my ex-boyfriends bought me a cherry red 63 Thunderbird. It was gorgeous. And I pulled up in the back parking lot, and I walked in and there was Mandy and Lisa. And I was like, they're like, "Oh, hey, we wanted to talk to you." And I was like, "Okay, but first you have to see my new car." And I took them to the back parking lot. And I said, "It's the perfect Lame Flame car, isn't it?" And they said, "Yeah. As a matter of fact, do you want to be in the band?" And I was like, "Yeah." And for years I thought it was because of my car, but apparently they were thinking of asking me to be in the band anyway.
Well,
So, so I mean, honestly though, it was just sort of this organic thing that happened because, once I got in the band, we all just clicked. And with bands, sometimes, hopefully all the time, there's a certain magic. And we definitely had that magic. We started writing a bunch of new songs and we just started playing out a lot. And it was great. It was a great time. We were just playing all over town and people started offering us record deals. I mean, I know that's probably one of your questions, but we really weren't ready for a record deal. We really weren't. And at that time, we didn't even know what a record deal was. We just, we were still forming our songs. And did we want a record deal? Probably, because it seemed like the right thing to do with your band. But we never ended up actually doing that. We just did some compilations. The Lame Flames, before I joined, they did Hell Comes to Your House, and it was a compilations of a bunch of bands, and they did the song Bad Sex, and it's on the compilation, but I'm not on that. And then we did a few songs for a compilation called Live at Raji's, which I don't know if it ever saw the light of day, but we did record for that.
Okay, I'll try my best to find that because I would like
Yeah,
to have.
would you? Because I would love to hear it. Absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, I'll let you know if I find one, and if I find one, it's yours.
Thank you. I would actually just, you can just give me a copy. We never got to hear, see, things were different then because you had to actually go into a studio and record and, rehearse. And like now you could do it at home and there's all these home studios and you could do it on your computer. Things were very different then. We went into the studio and recorded a couple songs and we never heard what we did.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like we couldn't just pop the tape cassette into our car cassette player and listen to it. It was just, it wasn't like that then. The transition from the studio to your car to your house was a lot more complicated.
Yeah, and it's kind of a blessing and a curse that it's so easy now. I mean, I would love to have more Lame Flame stuff on record and available, but as you
You and me
pointed out, it
both.
was much harder to do that. So
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, the fact that there's even, and I was trying to explain this to some friends of mine that are a lot younger. They're like, oh my God, do you have more photos? We want to see pictures of Disgraceland. We want to see pictures, video of your bands and stuff. And I said, here's the thing. There were no camera phones. And they were like, what? And I said, no, there were, there were just people with cameras, and the people that had cameras because they studied photography and they spent a lot of money on their cameras. So if there are photos of anyone from back then, it was because most likely they were someone of interest. Do you know what I mean?
yes, yeah,
Not
definitely.
like now there's, social media and everyone, there's photos everywhere, whether you like it or not, it
Yeah.
was very, very different. And in a lot of ways, I like it better the way it was,
Mhm.
because if there was going to be a photo of you somewhere, and it's kind of old Hollywood, then, your agent approved it or whatever. We didn't have agents, but the photos were approved before they showed up in a fanzine or in a magazine or in the LA Weekly. Now you open up your social media and there's this horrifying photo and it's just like, take it down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was much more control and consent going on with that kind of content than there is now, where like everybody has their phone in your face.
Right. And because of that, there was a lot more quality.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
As you pointed out, a lot of the photographers that were on the scene back then had been trained and they really put effort into it. And and again, I like the fact that we're able to record more now. It's a lot of fun. I mean, I do it myself, but at the same time, I know what you mean. There was something. I'm sure that it kind of made you feel like you were accomplishing something and that you were special on the scene when you saw pictures of yourself. You know?
Well, it was more special to actually get something done. I mean,
Mhm.
any creative project now always feels great, and being able to do it ourselves feels great, but having someone approach you and say, I'd like to record you, that's an esteemable ask, and that's saying that's because they think you're worth recording. So, and I think it was kind of what you were leading to earlier. It's in some way it's a blessing and a curse, because there's so much out there, bad, good, ugly,
Yeah.
and then there was just more, there was just more hand-picked music and content. Yeah.
Yeah, like you knew that people were truly making an investment in you with their time, their money, and their affection. Whereas now it doesn't take as much effort.
Right, exactly. Yeah, they were investing in you with their time and their money. Absolutely. And that was also, a huge vote of confidence as well. And even though it was punk rock and um it was DIY and we could do it ourselves, there were still other people doing it for us. There were
Mhm.
still other record labels, and they were still spending their money to record us. And now, I mean, that's still happening now, obviously, but it's just the bar is so much lower.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And people are kind of putting things online now and calling it art when I don't think it's art whatsoever. So,
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a tough thing to comment on because I don't ever want to stop somebody from having some form of artistic freedom
Yeah,
at all. And I think it's great that people, want to create and do what they do. And I think everyone should be able to do that. But I understand what you're saying. I don't, there's just, it's so great when you actually see things that you love. And
exactly.
in some ways, when things end up online, in a way, it kind of takes away from it because it just shows up there. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's just a lot more.
Mhm. Yeah, and it was much more of a big deal when you had a record release as opposed to just setting something out online. Now, I mean, when people bought your records, they actually had to go to a store and put effort and choose your record, whereas now everything is readily available.
Yeah. Yeah, it's readily available and on so many different platforms. I can't even keep up with the amount of platforms, but it's all there, and yeah, and there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, right? It's just it's out there and it's just it will and that's I mean that's one of the interesting things about the internet that kind of bothers me because nothing it's not like you're doing a magazine or a newspaper where here's today's news and then this was yesterday's news or you know soon we'll have tomorrow's news. It's just all there. I always check the date because it's all out there and it's not going anywhere. It's not like no one's looking at it going, oh, this is from last month, let's take it down. It's there.
Hmm.
So it's, sometimes I'll read something and go, oh my God, that person died. And they're like, someone will be like, well, yeah, they died like 5 years ago.
Definitely. It's
Not to make light of death, but you know what I'm saying.
yeah, I mean, it's hard to keep track of everything when so many things are being thrown at you, you know?
Right. And there's that too, being pulled in so many different directions. Absolutely. And that to me is definitely something that I try to work on because I'll open my computer and I'll just fall into some scroll hole for a couple hours. And, before I know it, it's like, oh, I have to do 40 other things for myself.
Exactly. Like, and I'm bad about that too. That's why I try to make to-do lists for myself and try to figure out how much I can do in a time period before I let myself get lost online.
Right. And it's a luxury. It's great. It's great. And it was especially great during the pandemic because it helped us all stay connected. And I mean,
Yeah.
my publishing company, Punkosted Press, we flourished as a result of the pandemic. And, and I don't say that lightly because it was a really awful time. But I thought if I'm going to be stuck at home and all my writers are stuck at home, let's get some things done. And we did, you know, we made
Yep.
use
And
of the time.
yep,
Yeah.
and that's an excellent attitude to have about it as well.
Yeah, and I taught myself a bunch of things too. Like I taught myself iMovie and I just said I'm going to do stuff. And also, I binged watched a million different things and
Mhm.
but the good news is that it was all really, a lot of it was really good and great and a lot of inspiring stuff. The time wasn't wasted. Let's just put it that way. I didn't waste the time.
Exactly. And there's a way to use it as a great educational tool and a great enrichment tool. And it sounds like you know how to do that.
Well, I just dove in. I just for anyone who's watching this, if you want to learn something, just go to YouTube. You can learn how to do anything. And I used YouTube and I figured it's out there. I'm gonna do it. And yeah, and it's been a lot of fun,
Yeah.
you know.
And TikTok is great for that too.
Yeah, TikTok. Yes. Another thing that I get lost in, but I don't know if you do this, but I do it. Like I'll just get so lost. And after like about maybe 20 minutes, I'll start to get the heebie jeebies. Like I'll feel super voyeuristic and I'll just shut the computer off because I just feel like I'm spending too much time in other people's lives and they don't even know I'm there. It feels, I don't know, something about it gives me the heebie jeebies. Does
For
that
me,
happen to you?
yeah, and for me it kind of depends on what I'm looking at. I mean, sometimes people get very personal and very confessional and I mean, and I think that people have every right that they want to do that. I mean, you can say whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anyone else. But
Absolutely.
but I know what you mean though. It can also feel like an act of it can also feel like oversharing or like you're knowing more about somebody than you really need to. You know what I
Well,
mean?
and I think it has a lot to do with the sort of the intimacy factor. I mean, this is one of the things that bothers me about it. People get to know you so much faster because of how you post than they would have normally if you were doing it in real time in person. And I feel like a lot of things get skipped. A lot of um a lot of things that you would normally do just in real life, seeing each other in person, there's just a lot of things that get skipped. And I think that has somehow, how people ghost people online, or people become, basically you become friends faster, but you also stop being friends as well because it's just so easy. It's just too quick.
Yeah.
It's basically because there's no soul in the exchange.
Exactly. And kind of like you pointed out, there's a lack of truth and an inability to see the whole picture of a human being. I mean, I think that looking at a person's social media profile is sort of like watching a movie about a person that was written and directed and stars them and edited by them. You're getting their voices.
That's really funny. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like you're getting the edited version of who they are, not the truthful real life version of who they are.
right. Exactly. But I think that also swung the other way with the pandemic because a lot of people were talking about a lot of their hardships online as well,
Mhm.
which goes the opposite way because we're also missing all this other good stuff about their life. Like you said, it's very one dimensional. Absolutely. I mean, but it is what it is. It's all we had for however long, the last 3 years.
Yeah. And I think that kind of the best way to deal with it is just to be as honest as you want to be and to be transparent about things that you go through. I mean, when I use social media frequently and I try to be honest about some of the difficulties that I face in interviewing people and in other areas, but also capture the joy as well. You know, it can, I feel like there's a healthy way to do it and a way to do it without getting too obsessive about it. It's just down to what how much we're willing to discipline ourselves, you know?
Absolutely. And I will say this that once upon a time you had to weigh in a journalistic way. People went to school and they got degrees and they earned the right to weigh in. And
Mm.
now that's all gone. There's no integrity in journalism. I mean, look at the news that's on television. They give their opinion, and once upon a time you didn't do that. That wasn't considered proper journalism. And I don't think everybody should weigh in. I think it causes for too much distraction and
Yeah,
people
and the
get
thing
caught
is,
up in that minutia.
yeah, and the thing is, like, I think that one thing people forget is we're all entitled to our own opinion, but we're not entitled to our own facts. And and also there are just going to be people who are better informed about certain things than we are. Like we
Right.
should trust their opinion more than our own intuition. And it's tough when all these news organizations are putting people on who shouldn't be on there. And do you know what I mean?
Yes, yes. And the truth, whatever the truth is, it gets buried.
Yep. Or we
You know
get
what
like
I
a
mean?
very twisted version of it. I mean, there used to be a law in place that kind of safeguarded news against the misrepresentation that happens now. But I think it was Ronald Reagan who took away the law. And ever since then,
Probably.
yeah, we've seen the rise of organizations like Fox News who kind of build I mean, we just saw in the Dominion lawsuit, they kind
Yeah.
of build a lot of their so-called news upon lies and upon their own opinion of what situations should be rather than just telling the truth and reporting it accurately.
It's seriously corrupt. It is. It just is. And yeah. And so basically for myself, I just don't. I don't talk about politics. I don't talk about religion. I don't do any of that on social media. I don't engage in it. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's wrong. I'm just saying for me, I don't. Uh,
Exactly, and that's perfectly healthy. I mean, I think that people have the right to speak about it or they have the right to keep their opinions to themselves. It sounds like you have a healthy approach to it.
it just doesn't work for me. I think, first of all, religion or spirituality or whichever way you lean, I think it's really personal for me, it's personal. And I don't want to be posting. I like to keep it light and polite.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say, you're adorable on social media too.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. One
Alrighty.
never knows.
Well, no worries. You really are.
Thank you.
Alrighty. And back to the Lame Flames. I'm curious if you wanted the Lame Flames to be kind of a feminine contrast to a lot of the masculinity that was happening on the Sunset Strip at that time.
We really didn't think about that. We weren't, a lot of the things that came later, like, Riot Grrrls and even, obviously there was the feminism movement in the 70s. None of that entered our arena at all. We weren't trying to, it wasn't about, we're going to do this because we're women and we want to do it for women. We just did it because we wanted to do it, because we were inspired to do it. And it was fun. It was amazing. Actually, it was more than fun. It was a really magical time. And we were completely accepted by, I don't know if a lot of women accepted us. I mean, we had a lot of women friends, most of them in other bands, like, Pleasant was my roommate and she had the Screaming Sirens. And, it was, and men were fine, they were great. They were, super helpful. And our backup band was all men. It was the Apes, and they were three brothers who grew up together playing music. One of them, played drums, one of them played bass, one of them played guitar, and they were our backup band, and they were lovely. I mean, they were so lovely to us. We were really lucky to have them as our backup band. But there was never any like, oh, you can't do that because you're girls, or oh, look at them trying to do that and they're girls. It was the scene was just one big happy family, really.
Nice. And
Yeah.
what was it like when you were performing? I mean, were the crowds really raucous, and were they made up primarily of friends and people that you knew, or primarily of people who came in and basically were music lovers and watchers rather than musicians themselves?
It was everything. It was just a big mix, and it really depended on where we played. And the crowds were great because there was just a great, hearty, healthy scene going on then. And there was a lot of bands to see, and there was a lot of clubs to see them at. And there was the Scream, there was the Whiskey, there was the Scream downtown, there was the Scream in Hollywood, there was the Cafe de Grand, the Club Lingerie, Raji's. There was just so many places to play, and it was a thriving time. It was before parking got really weird in Hollywood. You could still park then. And who is it that says, I think it's Rodney Bingenheimer, that says parking killed rock and roll? Because eventually, especially in West Hollywood, the street permits came up. And I get it, the people live there and they want to be able to park when they got home, but eventually we had nowhere to park. But that didn't affect us. Especially because when I was living at Disgraceland, it was between Vine and Highland, and between Sunset Boulevard and Hollywood Boulevard. So everything was walking distance or cab distance. And I've said this before, it was kind of like a punk rock Mayberry, because I'd hail a cab and it would be Dobbs, who eventually was the owner of Raji's. Or you'd go into a store and you knew the person working there. It was a village. It wasn't really a city yet. It hadn't exploded. And I think and I'm not saying, this is just my guess, once the 1984 Olympics got here, people came from a lot of different places from all over the world and saw a lot of opportunity and came back and did change the face of the city. But before that happened, before they could come back and do that, Hollywood it was like a village. It really was. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I love the way that you just described it. It really gives a great picture of what it was like to live there at that time.
It was amazing. And when the clubs closed down, everybody would pretty much end up at our house. Like, I would open the front door, 2:15, 2:20, there'd be a knock, and I'd open the front door and the whole club was on our porch. This is when I lived at Disgraceland, and the party continued. We we'd wake up in the morning hungover, we'd get coffee or whatever, and we'd go to band practice, or we'd get ready to do the show, and we'd do the show, and then we'd have the party in the backstage area, and then the party would roll over to our house, and the club would roll over to our house, and we'd go to bed and wash, rinse, and repeat. We'd do it all over again. And life was really simple. And there wasn't a lot of, there wasn't a, like, nothing was on the internet. Like now, in order to, I was trying to do a change of address the other day, and it was all on the internet. It's like, well, if you pay for this PDF program, it's like, I just want to do a change of address. We can charge you $8 a month. And there's all these things that are attached to, if you click something, you don't know what you're signing up for. And those days you just filled something out and turned it in, and it was just more simple. And there wasn't all these distractions or these learning curves, which I'm not against the learning curves, because I really feel like life is a series of leaps of faith and learning curves. Absolutely. But once the computers were introduced and once the internet was introduced, is just this whole huge world of learning curves. And it seems like as soon as I learn how to do one thing, like even with the publishing company, something on the internet changes everything. It's kind of the way it is. So we didn't have any of that then. Not only did we didn't even have call waiting. We didn't have answering. When I lived at Disgraceland, I had an answering machine that lived under my bed for 4 years because my brother gave it to me. And we never had an answering machine. We didn't have call waiting. If you called our house and we were on the phone, you got a busy signal. And if you didn't want to wait, you could make a collect call, you could do an emergency breakthrough. And do you know what that is?
No,
That's awesome. Well, okay, so I'll explain it like this, because when Pleasant and I lived at Disgraceland, like her room was at the beginning of the hall, and mine was at the very end of the hall. It's like her room, the kitchen, the bathroom, and my room was at the very end. And eventually, because we were both in bands and we had one phone, I thought, I have to get a phone. So I got a phone put in my room and my own phone number. And just for the hell of it, she'd be on the phone down the hall, and I would make an emergency breakthrough from down the hall. And what an emergency breakthrough is you could call the operator and say, I've been trying to call this line for a long time and their number's busy, and I need to get through. And the operator could literally bust into their phone call and say, I have an emergency breakthrough from Iris Berry. Do you accept the call? Yeah. And they would either accept it or not. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
That was amazing. And then there was also the collect call. If someone could call, and Pleasant and I used to do that nonstop. We'd call each other collect from down the hall.
Again, I lived in an era where there weren't cell phones, but it was over pretty quickly. I think around the time I was 12, that was when cell phones kind of took over the world. So just the days of landlines are a distant memory now.
Yeah, I miss the landline, absolutely. But cell phones are great too.
Yeah. But anyway, one thing that I was curious about is tell me about the time when the Lame Flames were actually extras on the movie Less Than Zero.
It's funny you should say that, because it was about a year ago, I was watching Less Than Zero, and we were in so many things. We were extras in things, and I had actual parts in things. I don't remember some of it. And I didn't remember that we had done Less Than Zero. And I was watching this one scene and I was like, oh, they're at the Scream Club downtown. And the next thing you know, there's my face on the screen. And I was like, and I stopped it. And then I got like 4 messages on my inbox on Facebook Messenger sending me screenshots. So what was it like? It was what I remember. It was like every other extra job. We sat around with all our friends, drinking, not as much as we normally would, because we had to be able to keep our eyes open and stand where we're supposed to stand or do whatever we were supposed to do. But it was basically like being at a party with all your friends, but you were getting paid for the day. And then you'd come home and you'd have to watch like the smoke machine crop off and whatever makeup they put on. But it was great. It was great. And I remember Less Than Zero was at the Scream Club downtown. And that was an amazing Scream Club because it was huge and it had like a big dance floor. And honestly, the bathrooms were they weren't supposed to be co-ed, but they ended up co-ed. Like the women's
Okay.
room, there was men in the, it was great. And a lot of bands, great bands played there. And so I guess when they filmed it there, it was kind of just like being at the club, but we were filming. So
Nice.
I'd like to say I remember more, but there was just so many that just kind of all blend in together. Do
Okay.
you like that movie?
I do. And one interesting thing is that another one of the extras on that movie, I, I don't know if you remember him, but apparently Brad Pitt was on set that day too.
Oh my God, no, I had no idea. He was just an extra?
Yep, he was just an extra. It was one of the first jobs that he got when he came to Hollywood from the Midwest.
That's amazing. Yeah, I had no idea. But you know what? Honestly, we probably wouldn't have talked to him anyway because, we didn't, it wasn't like we were, the happy friend brigade. We just sort of stayed to ourselves.
Yeah. Yep.
But that's awesome. That's good trivia.
Yeah. Another kind of job that I wanted to ask you about with the Lame Flames was, is it true that one or more of you wound up being extras on the music video to Welcome to the Jungle as well?
I was in it. I know, and I know Mandy was in it. And I know actually me and Mandy and Lisa were all in it together. I don't know that we were all in the same shot, but we went there. I think we went there together and yeah, because it was shot at the Scream Park Plaza, the one that's across from MacArthur Park.
Mhm.
Yeah. How did you hear that?
I think that I found a picture online of Mandy on set that day, but I wasn't totally sure if all of you had gone.
We were all there. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but not to take away from any of it or any of the glamour, but after you do these extra jobs, you just kind of just like, you know, when do we go? When do we get paid? But it's when after all that's said and done and the editing's done, it looks amazing. But to be there, it's like, okay, let's retake that for the 100th time, like
Yeah, yeah,
so we were
yeah,
kind of in that frame of mind, but we were probably also more jaded than most because, we were there and there, we had been there and you just, you get over. And like I said, these movies, these rock videos, these commercials that we did, they they take a long time and
mhm.
they obviously make them look great, but doing them, it could be not fun.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And the thing is, I used to be an actor and I did extra work as well, so I know that it's very slow and that it's not nearly as interesting as it looks. But
Right. And that's their job to make it look that way.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in retrospect, do you feel like proud that you were part of such an iconic video? I mean, Welcome to the Jungle is one of the most viewed videos from the 1980s of all time on YouTube.
Wow, that's a really good question. I didn't know that it's the one of the most viewed. Guns N' Roses was a phenomenon, and I knew that at the time. And Mandy married Duff.
Yes.
We were that was all happening in real time. I mean, the Sirens went on tour, and so Mandy came and stayed with me at Disgraceland for like a month. And we were just sort of going out because those days you would go out and flyer for your next show. So we
Yeah.
were going out flyering and you know, we were all at the same club and Duff was a friend of my boyfriend's at the time and he asked me to introduce him to my friend Mandy and it just and and I remember the first time I saw Duff and I said this to my boyfriend at the time. His name was Rat's Ass and he sang for a band called Tales of Terror and Pirates of Venus. He'd introduced me to Duff and this was at the sound check. And after Duff walked away, I just said, "Who is that guy?" And he's like, "That's Duff. He's in that band, Guns N' Roses. Have you heard of him?" I was like, "Yeah, I've heard of him." I said, "But something about that guy, he's going to own the world." That's what I said. I mean, that's not something I said. I didn't walk around going, making those kind of calls with people or
Yeah.
about people, but he just had that. They all had that something, that you could just, I don't know what kind of different charisma it was, but they were a phenomenon. And I'm not going to say they're a great band, and I love that first record. And I mean, that they weren't the kind of band that I was going to see.
Mhm.
They were more, because the whole punk thing was happening. And then right, I think it was around 85 is when the metal bands started happening, and the Troubadour started having shows, and bands like Guns N' Roses and Poison and Warrant and all those, and Motley Crue. The scene kind of opened up for them, and they, that phenomenon happened. And at the time I was working at this coffee shop called Duke's. It
Mhm.
was at the bottom of the Tropicana Motel, which was a very famous and amazing motel where bands stayed. They would go and stay for the weekend, and they'd end up living there for like 9 months. Like the Cramps lived there, and Elvis Costello was there. Like everybody, the Dead Boys, everyone, the Clash. Um, and I was the to-go girl at Duke's, at the coffee shop, which was right down the street from the Troubadour. And the band Poison was staying there because, they came to Hollywood. They were going to do, the music thing, and they do their band, and they would
Mhm.
come in every day. And the manager of Duke's was a really good friend of my dad. Somehow it was an interesting accident. He kept saying, "You look familiar." And then my dad came in. Of course, my dad came in. It's like, "Dad, what are you doing here?" He was like,
Mhm.
um, and he's like, "I'm really good friends with your dad." This was Fred, the manager at Duke's. And so Fred pretty much took me under his wing at that point. And he managed an apartment building in Hollywood on Whitley and Franklin. And the guys from Poison needed an apartment. So I got them their first apartment in Hollywood. I think they lived above me. And but yeah, no, but so anyway, I completely sidetracked. But yeah, so it was all merging. Like punk was happening. And so Guns N' Roses, did I think they were great? Yeah, absolutely. But it wasn't the kind of band that I was going to go see. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah, we all have our own tastes.
And again, I think they're great. And but yeah, it was part of this other thing that I wasn't really interested in.
Okay. I'm curious to know how did the Lame Flames end up concluding?
How did we end?
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so while we were gathering some steam, we were getting, we were on the cover of all the lovely rags in town, all the great music papers, and
Mhm.
or doing these pinup calendars and getting all these shows.
Mhm.
And Len Fagan, who booked the Coconut Teaser, he was just so lovely. He was so supportive of us. Like we'd be flyering down Melrose, and every time we'd get into a store, they'd already have the flyer because Len had already been there. Like
Nice.
he loved us, and he sent a limo to Disgraceland to pick us up. He just took care of us, and he gave us a residency. And so as we started gathering steam, and then Mandy started dating Duff, and that was a big deal then. And Ricky Rackman, I don't know if you're familiar with Ricky Rackman. He
Yes.
was the VJ for Headbangers Ball, and then he went on to do some other great stuff. But
Mhm.
he became our manager. And
Nice.
yeah, he became our manager. And so we were like, we must be doing something right if this guy wants to be our manager. And things like that were starting to happen. And
Mhm.
at that time, simultaneously, I was forming the Ringling Sisters. Plez and that happened completely organically as well. Um, and I loved Ricky, and he was doing some really great stuff for us. But he was having us do shows in all these metal places, and I didn't want to go that route. I didn't want to be in the metal scene. I wanted to be in this, East Hollywood scene, playing at Raji's, and, playing with bands like the Hangmen and the Pirates of Venus and the Sirens, and, you
Yeah.
know, um, and the Little Kings, and what's David Roach's? Oh, and Dave Roach's band. Why can't I think of the name of it? Uh, Oh, it'll come to me later. Sorry, Dave, if you're seeing this. But so, I had no interest in playing at FM station during a Wet T-shirt concert. And he got us great shows. He had us opening for Zodiac Mind Warp at the Variety Arts Center. But I remember calling him from a payphone that doesn't exist anymore, outside of the Frolic Room, and I said, Ricky, I'm quitting the band. You know, I called him from Hollywood Boulevard and he goes, are you okay? And I go, no, I want to kill myself. I mean, I wasn't really suicidal, but it was the sentiment because I really didn't want to make that decision. I loved both bands, but things were starting to pick up with the Ringling Sisters. And I just felt like I was being stretched in so many different directions.
Uh-huh.
And I loved the Lame Flames, but I didn't like the direction that we were going in. And I loved the direction that the Ringling Sisters was going in. And Ricky was like, sorry, Ricky, I'm going to say this. He was like, okay, I'm talking to Tammy. I'll call you right back. Well, he never called back.
Aw.
So it's just a running joke. Are you okay? No, I'm suicidal. Okay, I'm talking to Tammy. I'll call you back. Like I do that with my friends all the time. But no, I spoke to Ricky, eventually after that. And Ricky, he's great. He did great things for the Lame Flames. But so I left the band and they got Lorraine to take my place, who's lovely and a really good choice. And I don't know what happened to the band after that. I don't know why it stopped, but eventually it ended. And I don't know if it's because the scene ended or I don't know why they stopped or they lost interest or the magic was leaving. I'm not really sure. Or maybe they were feeling the same thing I was feeling. Maybe it had nothing to do with, being connected to the metal scene. Maybe it was just, it had run its course. Or maybe, it was whatever was going on, they stopped. And so Mandy and I got together and we formed our band, Pink Sabbath.
Mhm.
And so that's a whole other chapter. But that would be a question for Mandy because I wasn't there. And maybe, Mandy married Duff and, she was settling down and probably he was on tour and she probably wanted, to be with her husband. And if the band wasn't doing enough to keep her here, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of sounds like it was time for it to end and that you guys had other things that you were preoccupied with.
Yeah, people grow apart. Projects grow apart,
Mhm.
things happen. And it was all none of us, it wasn't that we weren't speaking. Nothing happened that we didn't, it wasn't about getting in a fight or anything. I mean, everything was on really good terms.
Yeah. And you
Just,
guys are friends to this day.
oh yeah, Mandy and I talk like 40 times a day.
Yeah,
At
and
least.
Mandy is so sweet. I've gotten a chance to meet her and also exchange messages with her and couldn't meet a nicer woman.
She's the best. Yeah. She and I are, we are definitely cut from the same mold. We really are. And even before we met, people would say, I would see people and they go, oh, you look just like Mandy. And Mandy would meet other people and they go, you look just like Iris. And we still get it to this day, which I consider a huge compliment. So
Yeah, you
yeah,
really do look like sisters.
thank you. Thank you. That's awesome.
One person who wanted me to say hello to you was Jeff Drake.
Oh, hi, Jeff. Yeah, that interview was great that you did with him.
Thank you. Yeah, that
I
was a lot of fun to do. I really respect Jeff.
People used to think that we were brother and sister as well because we had light eyes and dark hair and we had that same cop hat that we wore. um I can't wait to read his book. And I'm sorry that I haven't read it yet, but that's one of the drawbacks of being a publisher. It's hard for me to read things that aren't part of my publishing company because I'm busy reading the books that I'm publishing. Have you read his book?
I have. It is
Great.
wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And
Great.
yeah, and it's very engaging too. And he just did such a great job. And I really love the fact that he wrote it himself and that he didn't really use a ghostwriter to tell his story. You know what I mean?
You know what, I think either way is fine. And I know what you're saying. Some people aren't writers though. Some people don't know how to sit down and do that. Because I mean, I know how hard it is to sit down and write a book. And when someone does write a book, my hat goes off to them because it's not a small task. It's a big deal. But if someone needs a help or a ghostwriter and they need their story to be put down, I'm all for that as well. Because at the end of the day, when all is said and done and we're not here anymore, these books are going to live on for all of us. And that's what's going to be left behind. So whatever it takes to get your story out there. And Jeff is a great storyteller. So I can't wait. And he remembers so much, right?
Yes, and he's very detailed as well, and he knows how to tell it in in the right order too, and keep you engaged. Like, I was really impressed with him as a writer.
Yeah, that's great. I can't wait to read it. Yeah, the Joneses was a great band. I mean, the Lame Flames have a song about him. Did he mention
Really?
that?
No, he
It's
didn't.
called, yeah, it's called Bedroom Eyes.
Aw.
Yeah, I didn't write it, but Mandy wrote it, and yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I know that they were an item at one time,
Yeah,
so that's
yeah, 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 yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But there's a line in the song that says, "I don't care what band you're in. I don't care. Yeah, I don't care what band you're in. You're still not sleeping on my couch." Yeah, he should
But,
be flattered though. It's a great song. It's very flattering.
nice. You know, one person who actually kind of made the same point about how sometimes it helps having someone there to write alongside you is Paul Mars Black, because he's from what I understand,
Mm.
tried to write a memoir a couple of times, and he basically said to me, you know, it kind of helps when you're not a real writer to have somebody who knows how to set that path out for you, or to take your story and make it and put it into that format.
Absolutely. I mean, writing, you have to really want to write to be a writer, because it's kind of a lonely task. You do it alone. And when I when I left, when the Ringling Sisters ended and I wasn't doing bands anymore, and um I got a record deal with SST, New Alliance SST, to do a solo spoken word CD. I was
Mhm.
like, this is great. You know, I don't have to fight with anyone in the band. I get to do whatever I want. You know, it's going to be, but it wasn't that at all. It was quite the opposite. There was no one to collaborate with. There was no one to hide behind, and there was no one to be inspired by. I mean, I did it, but it's a completely different medium. It's in and like I said, you have to really want that story. You really have to want the story to live, to get it down on paper. So and to have a ghostwriter or a co-writer, it's to have a collaborator is super helpful. And
Mhm.
they're gonna point out things that you might not think are that interesting, and they're like, oh no, let's do that. Because I do that with my writers, you know, when I'm editing their books.
Mhm.
So yeah, is Paul doing a book?
I think that he was at one point and now he stopped, but I've encouraged him to take it up again, because I think that like he has a wonderful story to tell. And
Yeah.
apparently he actually told me that one time the Lame Flames opened for LA Guns. Is that true?
Yes. Yes. I'd like to say I remember that show, but I thought we opened a couple of times. I just remember and then after the show, I think me and Mandy and Nikki Beat and Phil Lewis went to the Comedy Store and saw there was this guy performing, and it was packed, and his name was Sam Kinison. I mean, I remember the after show more than I do the show, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm glad Paul remembers that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Paul's
I
great
think that, yeah, he's such a sweet guy. I love Paul.
and so talented, really.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, I hope he does this book.
his recent record with Joe Almeida from The Dogs Do More is excellent too.
Oh, I can't wait. I love that band too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check them out.
So let's get back to the Ringling Sisters.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, what was it like having such a talented group of women to around you in that band? I mean, you had Texacala Jones, you had Pleasant Gayman,
Yeah,
and a couple of other.
Napolitano, Debbie Patino, Annette Zelinskas, Debbie Doxter. It was amazing. And it didn't start out like that, because basically what happened is, and I still talk to them. I mean, I haven't talked to Jeanette, but Jeanette is kind of hidden away. I mean, I would love to talk to her, but she's not as accessible as the rest of them are. I mean, I was just texting with Annette earlier. Yeah, I mean, it was great. So much talent, and yeah, it was great. But it started out, it was just me and Pleasant, and we decided to make these chapbooks of our poetry. And I was working at CBS Studios then, and I had the key. So we went and we borrowed the Xerox machine, and we made these chapbooks. Basically, it was 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, and we cut and paste everything and pictures, and we made these books. And we were going into bars, like selling them for drinks. And Gary Eaton of the Devil Squares, and eventually he, you know, he did a bunch of other bands. He has his own solo project, and Him and Dave Catchings, who's, you know, Eagles of Death Metal and the Mojave Lords and a million other great bands. They were, you know, they got one of our chapbooks and they were reading some of the poems, and one of them was called 56 Reasons to Go Downtown, which Dave Alvin and I wrote together. And the other one was Kimberly Rose, which is something that Pleasant wrote. They asked us, do you guys mind if we put music to this? And we we're like, sure, go ahead. So they came over to the house, and it was, the songs were amazing. And they were like, do you mind if we put music to the rest of them? We're like, absolutely. And at that point, Pleasant and I think we'd done our first benefit for Holly Grove Children's Orphanage. It was our first, I think it was Easter. No, it was Christmas. And we did it at Raji's, and we were just calling ourselves Girls of Disgraceland. GOD happened to be the the initials. Oops. And but I said to Pleasant one day, and then we came up with the name. We'd taken our moms out to lunch at Bullock's Wilshire at the tea room, something that I wish everyone got to see. It was right out of a 1940s department store. The tea room was on the top floor, and women would come to the table, you know, Chanel, $8,000, you know, they would do the whole catwalk thing while you're eating lunch. And we used to take our moms there. And
Nice.
so one day we were trying to think of a name instead, because we talked about adding other women, and we even talked about who, you know, we knew we wanted Debbie Dexter. We knew we wanted Jeanette and Texacala and Debbie Patino and Annette. And I was like, well, maybe we're going to have to come up with a different name because they don't live at Disgraceland. And I think you know, we're thinking of all these circusy things. And then I just said, you know, the Ringling Sisters, and that was it. And so we, you know, we got them involved, and they brought their words, and Gary and Dave wrote music for those. But it was it happened so naturally. It was so organic. There was nothing about it that was forced or, well, we got to be here for this rehearsal this time. It was, you know, just showed up in our living room, and these things just happened. It was amazing.
Nice. And tell me about the writing of one song called Way Out West. That's probably one of my favorites from that era.
Pleasant wrote that song, and it's a great song. Yeah. I believe she'd seen a girl on the corner of Hollywood and Wilcox, like it says in the song. And she was, you know, probably come out here to make, you know, become something and be somebody, and was a prostitute, and Pleasant wrote a song about it. It is one of my favorite songs too.
And I'm curious what it was like once you started performing with the Ringling Sisters. I mean, how did it contrast with
It was
the kind of
weird.
body?
It was weird. People were like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Like, because there was all these bands, or like rock bands, and they didn't understand. They were like, what are you doing? Poetry and music? Like, they just couldn't wrap their brains around it. But then like 6 months later, one of them came up to me and said, I pawned my electric guitar and got an acoustic, and now I'm doing folk music. And I was like, what? Like, wait a minute, what? You don't have to do, you know, like, but that's cool, you know, like. And so at first people didn't know what we were doing. And then I think, I don't know who called me, but someone said that Lou Adler wanted to know if Iris Berry was still in the band, and if Texacala was still in the band, and could they come see us. And Lou, I don't know if you know who Lou Adler is, but he owns pretty much all of Sunset Strip, and he brought Jimi Hendrix to, you know, the United States from London, and
Yes.
he managed the Mamas. I mean, he's Lou Adler, you know, he's living legend. And he sent somebody down to see a show we did at this Mexican restaurant on Sunset, and it was like us and like 8 people in the audience. It was just a bad night, and I don't think any of them spoke English, and they were heckling us, and we were heckling them back. And I was outside, and I saw his assistant run out, and I go, oh my God, you came to our show, come another time, this was not our show. So what they did is they had us do a showcase for them inside the Roxy, because Lou owns the Roxy, and it was during the day. And he loved us, and he's, you know, he got us a record. He signed us to Ode Records, which was his label, a subsidiary of A&M Records, and he produced our record.
Nice. And what was it like being in that atmosphere? Because I know that you'd gotten a taste of that in the Lame Flames, but now you had a chance to make an entire record.
It was scary. It was scary. I'll just speak for me. I wasn't, because we hadn't been a band that long. We really hadn't. We didn't really have a foundation, and we weren't doing it. We didn't have a long game. It just happened, and we were just doing it, and um but it was amazing because Lou built us a studio right on the water in Malibu. I mean, I know he used it for other people, but he built the studio especially for us to record in. Yeah, it was amazing. And he's amazing. I think I talked to him. I spoke to him maybe 6 months ago. He still, checks in and is very interested, and he's a lovely man. Yeah. I'm very, very honored that we got to work with him.
Excellent. And did you feel like it was a challenge, you were up to? I mean, did you really want to improve yourself as a performer and as a writer and as a team player?
Yes, absolutely. But it was hard. It was just hard because, like I said, we, there was a lot of cooks at the time, if you know what I mean. And um, there was a lot of, we didn't really have, we didn't, like I said, there was no long game, but it was inspiring. It was amazing. And was I inspired to do more? Yeah, I was inspired to go solo and do my spoken word stuff. And I mean, the band, a lot of things happened. Like pretty much everything that could happen in a band happened. Somebody got pregnant, someone had a drug problem and had to go to rehab. That would be me. Just things happened. And I think about it now because we were all like so young. We were in our early 20s, maybe our mid 20s. And
Mhm.
I didn't feel young then, but I look at it now and we were so young. And Polygram bought A&M and we got lost in the shuffle. And so the band dissolved. But then what happened is me and Pleasant and Annette and Debbie Patino um, decided to start doing the benefits. And then Pleasant and Annette put another band together, which was amazing. And we had a residency. This was now in the 90s. We had a residency at what was it called? It was a place on, I think it was called Eddie owned it. It was on Pico and Robertson. And we had a residency for the summer. And so we got back together to do, to be the Ringling Sisters, with different band members. And it was great because we were doing what we wanted to be doing, which was writing songs and performing, and we had record companies interested, and nothing became of it. But yeah, a lot of things happen. And I mean, really, when you have that many lead singers, and here was the main thing with us and with that time period, when we told Lou or told whoever was in charge, well, we've got this other band over here, we all have our own bands. And they couldn't understand that. They were like, what do you mean you have your own band? Like, you have another band and you're doing this other. And yes, we had these other bands to begin with, and this was just a side project. So it was a side project that took off,
Yeah.
right? But everyone still wanted to do their other bands. Like,
Yeah.
no one wanted to stop, you know?
Yeah, so it was a situation where people kind of got pulled in different directions.
People got pulled in different directions, and their hearts, basically their hearts were in their other bands. And
Yeah.
I felt that I loved the Ringling Sisters so much. And then I was doing Pink Sabbath, and my heart was really in that band too. And not because the Ringling Sisters wasn't a great band, but when you have 5 or 6 women that are all lead singers and they all have their own bands, it's hard to expect that this is the one band that's gonna be the glue.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of sounds like even though you all liked it and you all enjoyed it, there wasn't really a clear path and a vision for where you wanted to take the band and how far you wanted to go.
And no one had ever done that. I mean, eventually the Traveling Wilburys did something like that, but even they were all people from other bands, and they had their other bands, and we all wanted to do our other bands. But it was also really exciting at the same time because it's almost like, let's see how far this can go. We got a record deal, Lou Adler, all these things were happening. And there was definitely a magic there, but it was still, everybody had their own band and they wanted to do that.
Yeah,
And
I
then
mean,
the thing with Polygram,
mhm. And one thing that, I mean, we were talking about Guns N' Roses earlier, and one thing that struck me when I was reading about their very early days, like their first rehearsals together, was how much they all wanted to be the biggest rock stars on the planet and how nothing was going to stop any of them until that
wow,
happened. Like they
I
were
didn't
all,
know that.
yeah,
Really?
like they were all on the same page. They all wanted to, I mean, they loved music, of course, but they wanted to go as far as they could. And when you have five people that determined, then you've got a much better chance of getting where you want to go.
Right.
So,
They were all on the same page with the same band.
yep.
Their heart was all there. Yeah. I hear you loud and clear. Absolutely. And as they should. I mean, look what happened. That,
Yeah.
a
And
lot of serious chemistry.
mhm. And I'm kind of curious, like this is just sort of a nerdy question from someone who loves the Sunset Strip, but do you think that the original five will ever like get together for one last show, or do you think that's pretty
The
much
original
done
five, you
now?
mean the Ringling Sisters?
Well, actually both now that you say that, but Guns N' Roses and the Ringling Sisters.
Oh, you think the original? Oh, you mean Guns N' Roses? Well, they're playing now, aren't they?
Well, Axel, Slash, and Duff are playing together, but they haven't done any shows with Izzy and Steven up there alongside them. Like
Right.
yeah, like those five. Do you think those five will ever, go up for one more show together?
I have no idea. I mean, I have an opinion and I have, a guess, but I honestly could not tell you because um people do what they want to do,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And I think everybody's doing what they want. Again, just my guess. I don't know that. Would you love to see that?
Yeah, and like I mean, even if it's only for one show, I would love to see them recreate that magic. And Mark Cantor actually said something kind of cool to me. We were talking and I pointed out the fact that it has been, I think it was 29 years at that time since the five of them had even been in a room together. Like they've met in twos, they've met in threes, they've met in fours, but they haven't been all five since I think early 1990. And I said, Mark, what do you think would happen if they were all in the same room again? And he hesitated for a minute and then he said, I think that they would hug each other and cry. And
Aw, yeah,
yeah,
for sure. Right?
yeah, I mean, I think that they would, and I hope that they would. And I'd love to see them be that rock band again. I mean, I think that they could have been the Rolling Stones if they had kept the glue together that was there in the beginning, but
Right.
wasn't to be.
Um, I saw them open for the Rolling Stones when they played at the Forum.
Really?
It was
That's so
wild.
cool.
Yeah. Um, but nothing's impossible as long as everybody's above ground, nothing's impossible, right?
Exactly. Yep. And they're really lucky to have all five of them still alive at this age.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, really lucky considering their, pardon the pun, their appetite for destruction. I mean, they were
Yeah.
all really, they have beat the law of averages for sure. And they're all super together and healthy and sober and, take good care of themselves. And, not everyone could walk through that and keep, because the mortality rate of being in a band is so high anyway, it's really, it's hard to keep a band together. Any band that's managed to stay together, that's a feat in itself because there's so many, there's that saying, there's so many egos, either egos or I goes, that's like a band saying, because
Yeah.
everyone is there and someone's getting left out or not getting enough or the other person's getting it. Yeah, it takes a lot. And I also think there's a certain magic attached to that for the bands that do stay together.
Exactly. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to go into the what ifs, but I do wish that they had seen through the storms and kept their eye on the prize. But and I've read Duff's book and I've read Slash's book and I know some of the stuff that happened. But if
when
they
you
had
say
one more,
seen What do you
It's
mean seen through the storm? What do you mean?
like kind of overcome the problems that tore them apart, you know?
Right,
Like
right,
if Steven had been able to get his problem under control and stay in the band, and if Izzy had worked out a way to stay in the band and still be happy, then they might still all be together. But
right,
yeah, it
right,
wasn't. So
right. But you never know.
exactly. Yeah.
Is that your like wish on the top of your wish list?
Well, I mean, as an interviewer, what I really want is to interview Izzy because he's been interviewed so little in his life, and
You think it's
I
because maybe he wants it that way?
well, I think maybe for now he wants it that way, but I think that eventually someone might have a good chance of convincing him.
Else you want to talk about? I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm kind of curious, like what it was like being in the Ringling Sisters at a time when grunge and Riot Grrrl were happening. I mean, did you feel a kinship with them, or did you see yourself kind of coexisting alongside that movement?
Well, we loved them and thought, we had them on. We had them like 7 Year Bitch. We had them on one of the benefits. I think it was 93 or 94. We did one of our biggest benefits at the Palace
Hmm.
on Vine, and we had Jim Carroll, we had 7 Year Bitch, we had it was Jeffrey Lee Pierce's last show. We didn't know it at the time, but it was his
Oh,
last show. We flew Jim Carroll out, and it's funny, me and Pleasant Annette picked him up from the airport. That is a hilarious story. And we flew 7 Year Bitch out, and we had Hubert Selby do a reading, and then Henry Rollins. I mean, and we were happy to have those girls. We loved them and loved what they were doing. It just it it wasn't our thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
We were still, we were always, and I can say this about the Lame Flames too, we were more, moved by Hollywood glamour. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And being feminine and not trying to be one of the guys, even though we were, but
Yeah.
we, I don't think we felt like we had to, you know, push our femininity, or it wasn't a political statement at that time when we started doing our bands. It was just, we were doing it because we could. It was just like punk rock,
Hmm.
we're doing this because we want to do it, and we can do it, and so we did do it, and that left a lot of room for a lot of magic, because there wasn't a political statement. It was just, all these, when you brought us all together, these amazing songs happened, and these amazing ideas and concepts, and you saw what we were wearing in the Lame Flames. I mean, I
Yes.
don't know if you know what we were wearing, but we went out and bought like jock straps and dyed them red and bedazzled them. I had like a Thrasher patch on the back, and an American flag patch on the front, and then a bunch of rhinestone fringe hanging. We just went for it. We weren't trying to say we can wear jock straps. We just thought they looked good, especially over black fishnets and black dance pants, like
Mhm.
we weren't really showing anything, but we were suggesting it,
Mhm.
and it was fun. We
And
just,
yeah, and I like it that you guys embraced your femininity. I love the style of the Sunset Strip, and as far as the comparisons between the Sunset Strip and Riot Grrrl, I mean, I think that there's room for both. Like I wish that the mainstream media hadn't gotten this idea that Riot Grrrl was the first time in a while that women had played rock and roll. I mean, there were so many women who were part of the Sunset Strip scene. They just weren't in Poison and Warrant and
and
Guns
there
N'
was
Roses.
so many people, women part of the, and absolutely true. And there were so many women part of the punk scene. I mean, you had L7. There was a lot of girls doing bands
Yeah, and
because they
Alice
could.
Bag.
In Alice Bag, absolutely. In X Scene, my God, right?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and Pat Bag, and yeah, there was, and the Go-Go's.
Mhm.
And again, it was because we could.
Yeah, it's just it's beautiful. I
Thank
love
you.
that. Yeah, and I mean,
Good
and don't get
time.
me wrong, I love Riot Grrrl and I love
Yeah,
what they
so do
stood.
I. Love them. It was just, they happened in the 90s. We started in the 80s. Fully, and it was a different, there were different things going on in the world at that time. You know, the things that had them start a band were different than the things and the reasons why we started a band.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that they both stand the test of time, you know?
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty. And okay, so tell me about how you started being a writer. Like was there a purposeful um intention to be a writer, or did it just kind of happen organically where you started writing books and poetry?
Well, I started writing, like I said, when I was about 7, I'd go in my room and write poems or whatever. And like I said, I didn't know I was writing poems, but I was copying, or I was influenced by Grimm fairy tales and Dr. Seuss. And my mom found them. By the time I was 10, she found about 50 of them, and she typed them all up, and they showed them to her. My stepdad, who wasn't my stepdad yet, showed them to my teacher, and they came to me and they said, look, if you write 50 more, we can get you published as a young writer.
Wow.
And I was like, no, I wasn't, I didn't, I thought about it, but I couldn't, I didn't understand how to make the transition. I was doing it for myself. And not that I was like, oh no, I can't do that. But I was kind of like, I can't do this. I was doing this. It was just a personal thing, a personal freedom. And suddenly to know that there was going to be all these eyes changed it for me. And I stopped writing, and I didn't write again until I was about 17 or 18. And that happened because I picked up a Bukowski book in the West Hollywood Library one day, because I was going through the B section for Barry. And I just thought, well, if I ever become a published writer, where are my books going to be? And I found a Bukowski book, who I'd never heard of, and a Baudelaire book. Baudelaire's book was Fleurs de Mal, which is The Flowers of Evil. And the Bukowski book was The Hills, The Days Run Away Like Wild Horses Over the Hills. And I chucked them both out, and I couldn't put either one of them down. And I fell in love with the translation of Baudelaire's book. It was half French and half in English. And the translations were beautiful. But it was Bukowski that I was really, because I felt like I was, he was showing me that I could write and I didn't have to rhyme, whereas Baudelaire still rhymed.
Yeah.
And I was so moved. And I have to say, and I've made this admission before, I never returned those books. I still have them. How much money do I owe the public library?
Yeah.
We won't tell them. So that changed a lot, and it was really inspiring for me. And I went out and I was trying to find every Bukowski book I could. And, you know, there was no Amazon Prime, and there were no big chain bookstores then. There was just the mom and pops. And there was this store on Las Palmas off of Hollywood Boulevard by Disgraceland called Baroque Books. And the guy who owned its name was Red Studolsky. And I used to go in there, and he had every book that Bukowski ever wrote. And he was friends with Bukowski. And he was like, I brought him our chapbooks, and he was like, you know, I could introduce you to Bukowski.
Wow.
We're good friends. I
Oh
could
my
introduce
goodness.
you, kid. And I was like, I sat there and I was like, yeah, I don't want it. I can't. I really love his writing way too much. And I've heard he's kind of a jerk.
Oh.
And I'd hate to meet him and have him be an asshole and not be able to read him. I said, thanks, Red, but I'm going to pass. Like, I just knew. And it's interesting because Razor, my partner in the press,
Yeah.
we didn't know each other then, but he would sweep the floors for Red, and Red would pay him in books. And he offered Razor to meet him, and Razor's had the same reaction.
Yeah.
He didn't want to meet him because he didn't want to hate him. Because,
Okay.
he was pretty, he was Bukowski, bar fights,
Yeah.
outspoken, said what was on his mind, and then some. So, but that's where I would get a lot of the Bukowski books, was at Red's. And he was great. He was so supportive of all of us. And he would come to all the Ringling Sisters shows. And then when I had side projects, he'd bring him, and his wife Minna would come. And, you know,
Nice.
lovely, just lovely. So, but anyway, getting back to, that's how I started writing. You know, it was very organic. I just did it because it came really natural to me.
Okay. And when did you think seriously about getting it published and eventually starting your own publishing company?
You know what, it was never a thought. It was Pleasant and I started making our own chapbooks, and then I guess it was 90, 91. I left Hollywood and I came back to the Valley where my brother lived and stayed with him because I had, things had fallen apart, and drugs had gotten the best of me, and I'd gone to rehab, and I just knew that I needed to get out of Hollywood for a minute. And
Okay.
Gary Hustwit was the owner of Incommunicado Press, and he reached out to me, and I'd already started working on my solo spoken word CD. Harvey Kubernick was the producer, and maybe Gary had heard. Gary was putting out Pleasant's book, Senorita Sin, and he contacted me and he said, I really like your work. Can you send me some of your work? I'd love to, publish a book of your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a Thursday. I gathered up a bunch of my work on paper. There was no email.
Mm-hmm.
I got a stack of it. I shoved it in an envelope. He got it, loved it. And by Tuesday, I was signing a contract.
Whoa.
My first book, which was 2 Blocks East of Vine. So I'd never thought about it, but when it happened, I was really excited about it. And I'm forever grateful, especially to Gary Hustwit, for publishing me and giving me that opportunity. Especially now that I'm a publisher, I really understand what it means to put out somebody else's work, and it's a big deal,
Yeah.
and now that I do that, I always appreciate him, but I appreciate him even more now. So
Nice.
that was, I want to say, we started negotiating like 91, 92, and I got the book. I got like a box of books like in 94. I mean, things took longer then. It
Yeah.
didn't, it took longer, and I was really patient. And I try to say that to my writers now, like once upon a time, it didn't happen overnight. But so, yeah, he published my first book and he was amazing. And then, but I never wanted to be a publisher ever. It wasn't something I dreamed of or thought about. And then Razor and I, in 2012, I guess it was January, the very beginning, he was living in Richmond, and I was editing his book, Better Than a Gun and Knife Fight. And he was speaking with Tia Chicha Press, which is Luis Rodriguez's press. Luis was poet laureate of Los Angeles, and he's an amazing man. He has Tia Chicha Press. It's a cultural center. It was in Pacoima, which is where I was from,
Yeah.
and now it's in Sylmar, and he's amazing, and he publishes a lot of people, and he's helped a lot of people. Like, he goes to jails and he helps guys transition out that were in gangs. I mean, he's an incredible human being, and his books are amazing. And so I drove out there with Razor. Razor and I had a show, I think it was at Library Grrrl. It was a Sunday. And so he said, I want you to meet Luis. I want to talk to Luis about, when you're done editing my book, I want to talk to Luis about publishing it. And we met with Luis in Pacoima. And as we're driving there, I go, Razor, I can't believe you're taking me back to Pacoima. I spent my life trying to get out, and here you are dragging me back. And so we met with Luis, and it was only like about 10 minutes. And he was like, this is great. I want to publish your book, but it's going to be 3 years. And we were like, we didn't get it. 3 years. And he looked at both of us and he said, but why don't you guys publish it yourself? And honestly, he might as well have said to me, Iris, take apart the Empire State Building and then rebuild it with your hands, piece by piece. Because I was like, publish it ourselves. I wouldn't know the first thing, and nor do I care to know the first thing. And so Razor and I left, and we went to Michelli's for dinner, and then we went and did the show. And I guess we talked about it. He says we talked about it in the car, and about starting a press. And we were bummed though, because we kind of felt kind of dissed. Like, why is it going to take 3 years? Does he just not want to do the book? And now I understand, because I've had to say that to other people,
Mhm.
and because because we're so backed up, and it is a quality problem. But so we did the show, and then Monday or Tuesday, Razor called me, and he was on, no, he texted me. He was in Richmond, texted me. I was on my porch in Woodland Hills, and he said, "So do you want to start a publishing company?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "What should we call it?" And my URL for MySpace was Punk Hostage. And I said, "How about Punk Hostage Press?" And he goes, "Yes." And so by January 13th, it was a Friday the 13th, we launched the press.
Nice.
And we were only going to do 2 books, mine and his. And I think we're coming up on our 50th book. Mike Roach, the bass player of TSOL, will I start working on his book. I'm finishing up I Was a Teenage Dominatrix, the 3rd edition by Shauna Kinney. And then I start work on Razor's daughter's book. She's an incredible writer. And after her, I do Mike Roach's book. We finished Mike Roach's book. It's called I Play with Giants, and he will be our 50th book.
Nice.
Yeah.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you. But never, it just, again, one of those beautiful organic things.
Nice. And what's it like for you choosing which books to publish? I mean, do you get a lot of submissions and you have to go through a lot before you decide?
We've never been in a position to take submissions because we always knew who we wanted. And then when people did approach us to submit, we were like, well, look, we're backed up for the next couple years and we don't want to stop you. Because the minute we started publishing, there was all these other people whose work and manuscripts that we loved and their writing we loved. And we're like, well, let's do theirs and let's do theirs. And so we've never been able to take submissions. And basically, I can't speak for Razor, but I think it's probably the same. My whole gauge for publishing, deciding to say yes to a book is after I read it, if my life is better for reading this book.
Oh,
And that's what makes me want to publish it. Is my life better for same way I feel about movies and bands and my, especially, but especially literature. Is my life better for reading this?
nice.
So that's the gauge. Yeah.
Awesome. Alrighty. In retrospect, is there one accomplishment as a musician or as a publisher or as a writer that you're particularly proud of?
Well, there's a lot, but the things that stand out really the most is I've received 2 certificates of merit and achievement for the city of Los Angeles for being a Los Angeles writer and for all the charity work that I've done and for being on the board of directors of Beyond Baroque. I've received 2, and to me that means a lot. I barely graduated high school, and so yeah, and so many. I mean, all the bands and the books, and yeah.
Yeah, you've made a wonderful mark.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I'm curious what it's like when you meet up with people from your days on the Sunset Strip. I mean, is there still that feeling of kinship and of just a shared love of the time that you
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like no time has passed at all. And we still have like, we can finish each other's sentences. And I mean, you say the Sunset Strip, but it's much broad. Oh, Junkyard. David Roach's band is Junkyard.
Junkyard?
That's I was trying to remember earlier. Sorry, David. But I still talk to everyone. Like if it's not on the phone, it's through Facebook Messenger or email. Like I'm still connected to everybody.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't have it any other way. It's basically just time marched on and we're still having, it's like one long conversation or one long, telling jokes or, well, you got to go see this movie or you got to go see this band or, it is kind of like family. It definitely is. It's that feel for sure.
Nice. So you're still
Yeah.
brothers and sisters under the skin.
Yeah, absolutely. We shared that time, and it's still, I say that time, but we're still doing it. We're all still doing creative stuff. And it's great to have these relationships, and it's great to carry some of them into the press and work on their books, And I mean, because the collaboration is everything. Getting to collaborate with the other writers and other people that I collaborate with, that's where the magic is.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt when I decided I wanted to interview you, I have to confess I felt kind of a kinship with you because I feel like what you do um with your with Punk Hostage Press is sort of like a much more expansive and great version of what I do on my show. Like basically we're amplifying these voices of people and recording their memories for the ages, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, no, I felt a similar kinship when I met you. That was at my book release, right? At
Yes, ma'am.
Wacko. And we, and it was great. And you were lovely. And thank you for coming. And that was just an amazing show. And right after that, we got all put on lockdown, you know?
Yes.
So I'm grateful that we got to, and I have to give big kudos to Keith because he was the one who really pushed for that show. Come on, Iris, we got to do the show. We got to do it and get tacos. And he was just really, and I was, I just finished the book and I hadn't thought about, oh, what am I going to do? Because you're still just wrapping things up. So I'm so glad that we did that show. And I'm so glad that, DH was a part of it. And I'm so
Yeah.
sad that, because we were going to do a bunch of shows and we couldn't. So, I feel a little gypped but grateful that that he did get to do that show. And,
Yeah.
yeah, and there will be more shows. And now that the world seems to be opening up, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the thing is, like, it was nice having that moment with all those different people that there to honor you and to honor the other people, and a lot of us didn't know that we were about to go on lockdown, but that was just a wonderful, way to start
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, if that had to be the one of the last things, so be it, because it was great. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jack was great and Keith was great and Essay was amazing and Annette. And yeah, we booked another show and Scott Eicher's art. We were going to do another show in Pedro and it got canceled. So, but I'm starting to book some things now. I'm trying to book something in the desert for all of us and book some shows here at Wacko and yeah, get that stuff happening
Exactly.
because that's
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. Doing something in Joshua Tree in particular would be amazing for you guys.
Yeah. Have you heard of the place called the Palms? It's in Wonder Valley. It's just past it. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm trying to do something there. Kevin Bone, who is he's booking us. He's lovely, and yeah, I'll keep you posted for sure.
And I'll stay in contact with you about the Joshua Tree thing because I have a couple of connections to some locations there, and maybe I could get you guys help get you guys booked for some stuff there.
That would be great. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I want to do shows here. I want to leave town and do shows. Hi Lola, here's my cat. Come here and do shows. Hey Lola, come here. Come here.
Lola, cutie.
You're not camera shy. Next time. But yeah, I want to book some shows and I want to, we've all been locked up too long, you know,
Exactly. Yeah, I
and
think that. Yeah, I think that now would be just the right time to do it. People have an appetite for that stuff.
people want, yeah, and it's so important. I mean, thank God for Zoom. Thank God for Zoom, but being with people in person is everything. It raises our vibrations. It's such an elevation of the spirit. We have to do this. We have
Exactly.
to. Yeah, enough already, right?
Yeah, I mean, nothing replaces being there for some, kind of like what we were talking about with social media. I mean, you can get to know a sense of the person, but it doesn't replace actually being physically there and getting to know them in real life.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Here she comes.
Oh, hi Lola. How you doing, sweetie?
Here, Lola.
Lola. Hi.
Say hi to all your fans. Sorry. But anyway, so yeah, let's definitely stay in touch about that. And any help with that would be amazing. Thank you so much. Absolutely.
Yep, I would be very happy to help with that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One location in North Hollywood that I actually think would be great for that kind of stuff is Republic of Pie. Have you ever been there?
No, is it great?
It's wonderful. My good friend Paul Inman did a show there recently, and he's about to do another one on Sunday. And it's beautiful, and it's got a stage where people can go up. It's got a lot of room, and the seats are really accessible. Plus, the best pies in Hollywood. I
Oh
have to say.
God. Now you're talking. You should have led with the pies. What are they like? Are they, like amazing homemade, or they make them there?
They make them right there. And the thing is, they've got like typical kinds. They've got like apple pie and pumpkin pie, but they've also got like kind of funky kinds too. They've got like matcha pie, and they've got like almond coffee pie, just and they're
What's
always coming out with
matcha?
new
What's matcha? I don't know what that is.
green tea.
Oh, right. Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Okay. I'm
it's
in.
really yeah, it's
Yeah.
really good. And again, I'll send you the contact information for them. They're pretty easy to get in touch with.
Okay. Yeah. Where in North Hollywood is it? Is it on Lancashire with all the other stuff?
Nope, it's actually on Magnolia. It's nearby.
Oh,
It's in the NoHo Arts District. It's between it's on Magnolia between Lancashire and Vineland.
I know exactly where it is. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's a great
cool.
place. Yeah.
Is there parking?
Um, that's kind of the downside. There's not much parking, but thankfully, about a 5 minute walk from there, there's a huge parking lot outside of the
And
Ralph's grocery store, so people could probably park there and get away with it for a show.
yeah. And there's also parking the other direction past the other way towards there's that 24-hour diner. I forget what it's called, but it's the other way towards the freeway on
Yes.
Magnolia. So yeah, you're right. There's a lot of parking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So, one last thing. We've already talked about some plans that you have for the future. Is there anything else that you really want to do and that you kind of have a drive to get accomplished in your life or your career?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's books of my own that I'm working on
Mhm.
and that I want to get done. And I started a while back, I started working on an oral history of the Tropicana Motel. I want to
Oh,
get that finished. And Pleasant and I are going to start working on our Disgraceland book.
excellent.
Yeah,
Yeah, both of those are going
yeah,
to be fantastic. I hope you get those done.
me too. Yeah, it's just setting aside the time. But I'm wrapping up, like I said, I'm wrapping up Shauna Kenny's book and Razor's daughter's book, OR, and also Mike Roach's book, I Play with Giants, and Steve Balderson, who's a filmmaker, a film director, his
Mhm.
book, Year of the Whore. And then once I wrap those up, I'm gonna Pleasant and I are gonna dive into Disgraceland, and I'm gonna try to dive into the Tropicana book. Yeah.
Excellent.
So fingers crossed.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Thank
I
you for
hope I
coming on. I
answered all your
appreciate it.
I hope I was able to answer all your questions and in a satisfactory manner.
Completely. You totally were. And I had a wonderful time. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you out in person.
Likewise. All
Okay.
right.